Okay, up until this point, we've installed Kali. We are familiar with the VirtualBox setup, and things are going according to plan. Now, let's say, for instance, that we are on a network segment and we want to kind of monitor what's going in and out and kind of get an idea of how that network traffic looks for our organization. Or we're doing a pen test and we just want to see what traffic is going in and out to see if we can get any juicy information that we may want to use later on for leveraging. All right, so go ahead and let's fire up those Kali virtual boxes and start up our Wireshark program. And simply to do that, on the top left corner where the little blue and white dragon icon is, go ahead and click on that and start typing in Wireshark. Oh, my mouse fell outside the VM there for a second, sorry. And we're just going to open it up. Now, it may take a second to load, especially if it's the first time it's loading, because this is something that needs to kind of detect the devices and get a familiarity with the actual system. But when it does open up, we can see here that these are all the interfaces that are on this particular machine. Now, whether that's physical or virtual, it doesn't matter. So pretend right now that we're on a physical box, and these are all the different devices that we have on this box in terms of network traffic. You can see up here that we have ETH0, any, and then all the others. But if you want to check and make sure that you're connected to an interface that is going in and out of the actual internet itself, go ahead and minimize your Wireshark and right click on the desktop and go to Open Terminal here. In here, we're going to type in ifconfig, all one word, and that will show us the interfaces that are on this system. And here in the middle, the default ETH0 that is NATed to our outside network, you can see that we have an IP address of 192.168.247.132. So this is the traffic, this is the interface that's going to be sending our traffic in and out to the rest of the internet. And for the purposes of this demonstration, that's the interface that we're going to monitor to pick up data on Wireshark. So let's go back over to Wireshark. Now you can select here by selecting ETH0. Come on, mouse, work with me here. And just click on your Start Capturing Packets button, which is up at the top left and is the blue shark fin. Or as I like to make sure that I can actually click on the gear that's just to the right of it, which is Capture Options. Now, why do I do this? Well, there are different kinds of modes that interfaces have. And right now it's working in standard mode for each of these interfaces. Traffic goes in, traffic comes back, etc., etc. But there is a mode called promiscuous. And you can see down here at the bottom, let me see if I can zoom in there for you for a second. There we go. You can see that that checkbox right there says enable promiscuous mode on all interfaces. This is a default option inside of Wireshark, and what it does is it takes the controller that we're using, the interface that we're using for capturing, and says, shut up. And I only want you to listen for traffic that's going in and out. It's not going to allow it to send any traffic out per request natively. Stuff will still go in and out. But the purpose of it at this point is to be able to listen to everything that's going on and just report back to whatever we're using. And in this case, that's Wireshark. Now you may be asking yourself, is that the only place that we can set up promiscuous mode? I'm glad you asked, because I'm going to close this the configure capture options out for a second, minimize Wireshark, and go back to our command line for terminal here and show you that there are different modes that we have set up for this interface that we're using right now. The first one being, let me zoom in here for you again, where right next to where it says flags equals 4136, we have up, broadcast, running, and multicast. Now this is a standard configuration for an interface inside of a POSIX-based system, Kali, Linux, etc. But we can add promiscuous mode to that interface to make sure that for a fact it is listening and to everything that's being sent to it and not trying to walk all over that traffic, so we can pick up a clear and concise picture of what's going on for traffic. Now, in order to do that, we just simply type in the command ifconfig-a ETH0, or specifically the interface we want to send in promiscuous mode, and follow it up with promisc, P-R-O-M-I-S-C. Now, do remember that even though this is the command for it, depending on how you're logged in or what system you're running for that Unix POSIX-based world, you may need to go back to the front. Come here, mouse. You may need to go back to the front and type in sudo in order to be able to run it, because this is an elevated rights command. So it's going to ask us for our password in Kali, and we're going to say Kali for our password. We're going to do another if config, if I can spell correctly today. Now, one more zoom in here. You can see for our ETH0 right in the middle of the screen, not only is it up, broadcast running, and multicast, but we can see that it also says ProMISC in there. So now that interface is listening to everything that's being sent to it. Now, if you're on a network that has a lot of traffic that's being sent to that interface, you will see the packets, the receive and send packets start going up increasingly quick. But that's because, more on the receive side, that we are getting everything that's being sent to that. Now, you may be asking yourself, where does all this traffic come from? And again, I'm glad you asked. So if we go back and reference the OSI model, we'll see that layer 2 is the actual switching layer, and that's where all the traffic is pretty much held at until it's ready to go out to the outside world on layer 3, which is networking or routing. That's where you have your gateways at, and be able to talk to the rest of the world that's out there. But switching is where we get all of our traffic internal to the network that does not need to be routed from one subnet to another. So on a layer 2 device, aka a switch, there's a command called session monitor, which we will get into later. I just want to give you the quick overview and idea of it right now. What we're doing with session monitor is basically telling that switch everything that comes across this switch, copy that traffic and to send it to one specific interface or VLAN. And from that interface or VLAN, we're going to send it straight to, in this case, our Kali box to capture all of that traffic. So everything that's going across that switch is going to be copied and sent to the Kali box that we assign to listen to all of that session monitor traffic. Now, the placement of that switch becomes a factor. If the switch itself is placed on the outside of the network, we're only going to capture traffic on the outside of the network. But if we place that switch at the perimeter of our network, where all traffic has to pass through, in and out, regardless of whether it's from us or from the outside world, it's forced across that switch. There's a router on one side, switch in the middle, router on the other, and that router on the outside is our connection to the internet through our ISP provider. That switch is going to copy everything that our organization has and be able to send it to wherever we want through that session monitor. Now, for those playing at home, you may be wondering if there's a way to do this on your home devices. Yes, there is, because if you think about it, your modem/router is that network perimeter device where we can actually send all traffic from inside the household out to the internet and back again. So when we set up our session monitor or any kind of network sensing device that we want to look at the traffic on, it's going to be set up at the outwardmost perimeter, and in this case, for home use, it would be on that modem/router/switch, because that is a layer 2/3 device. And we would send it back to a device or a system like Kali that's running in promiscuous mode to be able to read all of that traffic that's going through that one device that talks to the rest of the world. Now, I had to explain all that so that way what we do here in Wireshark makes better sense, because as it is right now in our virtual lab environment, Kali is only going to capture the traffic that's coming in and out of this one particular system, because we don't have it set up at that network perimeter in a real physical environment like we could if we were doing it in a real physical environment. So this is just play at home and see if we can get familiar with it before we start moving along and doing other things. So again, I'm going to click on the configure and options icon and make sure that ETH0 is selected. And you can confirm that it's ETH0 because if you expand it, you can see that the address for IPv4 and IPv6 is right below it, and it matches what we have in ifconfig. So I'm going to click on start, and the first thing we're going to notice is that there's populations of different packets. Now we'll go through this in just a second, but we're going to let it capture stuff for just a minute and we'll come right back. So 1, 2, 3. All right, so I went ahead and clicked the red button next to the blue shark fin. It says stop capturing packets. So it's grayed out now because I hit stop. And as you can see, we've captured a lot of packets. Let's scroll up here and we see we have packet number 1. We're going to scroll all the way down and see how many packets we got. 3,554. just in a span of what looks to be, if you look just right to the next of it, next column, 39.3348 seconds. So we have over 3,500 packets that were received by Wireshark in a span of 39 seconds. Now let's talk about what each of these columns mean before we start actually going into looking what's down at the bottom for each of the packets. On our most far left column is the actual packet number, and that would be the sequence in which the packet was received. Simply put, in order of 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. And the next column is the time. So when, from the start of that packet capture, did it take place? So packet 0 was packet 1 was the first one it took, so that was obviously time marker 0. Packet 2 came right after that. I'm talking milliseconds right after that at 0.00031 seconds. So it was almost instantaneous. The next column over is our source, and that is where is that packet coming from, so that the next column can be the destination of going to. Followed by the column of protocol being what traffic type are we looking at here. Now, right now, this is saying MDNS. Now, if I scroll down a good bit, I can see that there are other types of protocols here, such as DNS, TLS, which is your HTTP secure type stuff, TCP, which is the type of IP traffic that was going across, so not necessarily a particular protocol, but more so the broad overview of TCP and or UDP. And then we have DNS, which is name resolution, HTTP right there, which is something, it's TCP, but it was specifically TCP port 80, so it knew that it was a specific protocol under TCP. And you can look and see that there are some other ones through there. Now remember, this is just a 34 second capture that tells us basically what the network flow looked like for that amount of time. Now I'm going to pick a random packet. I'm going to close my eyes, turn off my scroll clicker, and go down and stop and select that packet right there. So that way we can analyze it and get an idea of what it is that we're looking at for a basic overview. So we're looking at packet number 290 here that happened at 23.526 seconds into our capture. And the source for this was 192.168.247.132. And if we did some digging, we would find out that that's actually the IP address of this Kali box that we're using. Well, the traffic was going out to 34.160.144.191, and it was using TCP protocol. Now, the length and the info are subjective because the length just tells us bytes-wise how big that packet was, how big the delivery was through the straw of the network that we were trying to push or pull through. And then in the info, that is everything that was sent, the summary of what was sent from, to, and from. So basically giving us the rundown of what actually happened there. Now, down on the bottom section of the page here, you see that we're broken up into 4 sections. Let me zoom in for us real quick and there we go. It's done by frame, which is the overall packet itself. And then we have Ethernet 2, which is basically the outside wrapper. Think OSI layer 1. And then we have Internet Protocol versioning, which would be a portion of OSI layer 3, 4. And then once we get down to TCP, the 4th section there, we're looking at OSI layers 4 and above. Now, is that a direct correlation? No, but that's a general idea of how to accept how this packet is broken down. And if we take a look at this packet line by line, you can see that frame 290, which is the actual packet number here, was 54 bytes on the wire, and 54 bytes were captured. And it tells us where it was captured from. In this case, it was interface Ethernet 0. And it just gives us the overall physical data of this packet. How big it was, what the frame number was, how long it took. Nothing really past that other than what the actual physical information was. So if we close or minimize that and open up Ethernet 2, we can see that we have the destination, the source, and what type it was. Now, if this was or let me back up for just a second. If you notice, the destination and source are in MAC address form because Ethernet 2 is still giving us some of that physical information of the actual interface. And we can see that the source actually responded back with some of that information as well. For those old enough to remember, like myself, this is that ARPA stuff. But the third line here tells us what the delivery method was for that layer 3 and above. And in this case, it was IPv4. Now, it could be IPv6 and it could be other stuff. But right now, we're looking at IPv4. And that's why the next packet is Internet Protocol version 4. I'm going to close that, open up the IPv4 stuff. But we can see now we have a source and IP address of actually what it looks like in IP versioning. On top of that physical layer of the OSI model. So now we're into layer 2 and we're starting to make our way towards up in the layers. Now you can see that there's other information in here as well, like total length and stuff like that. And this is definitely stuff that we will get into way later on down the road as far as packet analyzation and network intrusion analysis. But for the overall view of what we're looking at here, this is just a specific area of the packet that gives us more information about what happened during that communication, such as protocol, it was TCP. The time to live, 64. And we can use that information right there to kind of determine what operating system sent and received this from clues and tips and tricks that we'll cover later on as well. Remember, we're just kind of looking over the traffic that went in and out of this system, whether it was direct or through like a session monitor or captured from somewhere else. Now we can close that and open up the TCP portion of this because that's really the meat and taters of what we're looking at here. We know the source, we know the destination. Now let's figure out why they were communicating all together. So the source port for this, which is from us, was port 52,665, which is a non-common, non-standard port, but it was going to port 443. Now, if we know our ports and protocols for stuff like Security Plus, we know that port TCP 443 is HTTPS. So right here, we can identify that this traffic on this particular packet was from this system to a secure website. And if we scroll down, you can see where we have sequence, acknowledgement, and other flags and stuff like that, because now we're talking about the TCP handshake of SYN, SYNAC, and ACK. Again, lessons for a different time, but we're just looking over the overall view of what Wireshark can do. Now, if we go all the way down to the bottom and expand the sequence and ACK analysis, we can see that we have an acknowledgement. This is an acknowledgement to the segment in frame 289. Which means that this packet is associated in a bundle with other packets. How can we expand that view even further and start digging into more? Simply, we just right-click on the actual packet itself and we can go to follow. Now, depending on the type of protocol in use, will give us the options that we have for what we can follow. And in this case, we're following the TCP stream. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to follow the TCP string. And I know this looks like a bunch of gibberish. That's okay. We're going to minimize it for just a second. And you'll notice that in the search bar now, we now have a search criteria here of tcp.stream EQ1. So everything that was in that one stream that we just said follow on, these are all the packets associated with that stream. And you'll see there's quite a few packets associated with that. If we go back, let me alt tab over to our actual, wrong one, to this right here. This is the beginning of the traffic at the very top. You see where in the background 157 just highlighted. If I go down a little bit more, 163 just highlighted. And the more I keep going down, the different packets highlight because it's showing us at which part this belongs to. Now you may be thinking to yourself, this is nonsense. What does this mean? Well, because this was over 443, this was encrypted using SSL and or TLS because it was an HTTPS connection. This is just giving us a little bit of the traffic flow. And if it was not encrypted, let's say it was HTTP, you would be able to see this in plain text and figure out what's going on. And even now, you can kind of see some of the handshakes that were going on. So we know that this was done with Mozilla.net and one of the subdomains there, and that there was a handshake that happened right here that says, let's encrypt 1.0. And then we got the content right here from their signature site. And as we start moving down, we can see that inside of the actual chain itself, we have a digital signature trust CO for a root certificate authority. So that means that a certificate was used to do this SSL. And right here, that was this packet I just selected, and you can see right there where it says info certificate. Now, even within this packet stream itself, you'll notice that some of these say TCP for protocol, some of these say TLS. Well, I'm going to right click that TLS and go to follow, and you can see that now we have the TLS stream available too. Now, I'm not so much worried about what's actually in the TLS stream window. I can close that. But this is the actual string of communication that we got that said, for instance, in the info plane right there, client hello, server hello, there's the certificate, new session ticket, there's the key exchange, and the client key exchange. So what we're looking at, not in real time, but a replay, is actually how a client, this Kali box, went to Mozilla's website and did a key exchange to pass that SSL or TLS certificate for the session to be encrypted itself. Now, there's some other stuff that we can do here too, and that is later on, we'll learn how to verify that this traffic is legit and where it's supposed to be going or not, because there is such thing as spoofing out there. But we can expand. I have this TLS version 1.2 certificate packet selected, and expand on our bottom section here, the transport layer security. Expand some more, and we can actually see right here where the actual certificate is. Now I can right click that and go into more details about the certificate itself and even extract the certificate. Now to do that, we would just select one of the certificate strings in here, right click and go to export packet bytes. We're going to save it to our desktop as tls.crt and save. And when we minimize Wireshark, we can see right here, there is our TLS CRT. Now we can open this up and see that right there, there's the actual information of the certificate itself. It did a straight export of the TLS or SSL certificate. So if there was any question that that site was malicious in nature, I would be able to export this certificate and verify if it was actually with that site or not. And I can verify the information of what sites are allowed to use the certificate. And in Wireshark, we can see, was that certificate used with the proper site that it was associated with, or was it being spoofed? Now, the last thing I want to cover is it's been here on the side right now, and this is the hex output, or what's considered called the raw output of that actual capture. There are tools out there called TCP dump and TCP replay, which we will cover in depth later on, that actually capture the data in this manner right here. And the reason it's done so is it cuts down on the overhead and makes it so much easier for us to record that traffic and use for analyzation in either an intrusion protection system, an intrusion detection system, or just sit it on the side and review it later here in Wireshark or whatever other program. Now, as always, I encourage everybody to play along at home and try to use Wireshark on your own. And fear not, no matter what kind of traffic that you capture inside of Wireshark, you're not going to send any traffic back out. So any changes that you make to those packets inside of Wireshark, it's not going to affect the traffic that's already happened or occurred on that network or system. So feel free to play around and try to figure out what happened on that particular network stream that you captured. Keep sending in those questions and things for us to learn about and how we can apply this to other cybersecurity related programs. And as always, leave a comment down below, and we will try to address every single one of them. I hope you liked it, and let's get to learning.